I'm pleased to welcome everyone joining us today for our celebration of the 2020 graduating class, more specifically for joining us for this conversation on achieving success in the face of recession. We have alumni, faculty, current students, friends and family, and community members tuning in from across the globe. My name is Keer Liu, and I'm the 2019 Math Co-op Student of the Year. I received the honor after completing a term at Slack as a software engineering intern. Co-op education really helps me to enhance my engineering skills and communication skills as well. Soon you will meet our presenters, but before you do, alumnus Kim Davidson has a brief message they would like to share with the class of 2020.
Congratulations to the Waterloo Math class of 2020. I'm Kim Davidson, a graduate of Waterloo Math 1981.
And I'm Kristen Bargill, a Waterloo Math grad of 1993, and I also want to pass along my congratulations.
You're probably wondering, who are these two distinguished older gentlemen?
We both work at Side Effects in Toronto, alongside many other Waterloo Math grads and co-ops.
I'm president and co-founder of Side Effects.
And I'm VP of R&D. At Side Effects, we've created world-class,
groundbreaking,
award-winning
3D animation software called Houdini.
Houdini is used for special effects in films, games, commercials, and lots more.
Wait, did you say award-winning?
Yes, like this Emmy.
I was thinking more like this. The Academy sometimes,
but not every year,
awards an Oscar for outstanding technical contributions to the film industry.
And many Waterloo graduates have contributed to these awards.
So welcome to the Waterloo Math Alumni Club.
And the start of your award-winning journey.
Cheers.
Cheers.
We are here today for a conversation between two thought leaders about the importance of thriving in times of uncertainty when preparing for your next career move, a timely topic for graduating students, seasoned alumni, and for current students. Dr. Norah McRae is the Associate Provost, Co-operative and Experiential Education at the University of Waterloo. Her involvement in cooperative and work-integrated education spans more than 20 years. Joining her is esteemed alumnus Rudy Karsan, BMath Level 79, and Managing Partner at Karlani Capital. Rudy is passionate about creating jobs that matter and revolutionize the global human resource space as co-founder and CEO of Kenexa. He grew it to become one of the most significant HR firms valued at over $1 billion, recently acquired by a record deal. Before his career in tech, Rudy studied actuarial science at Waterloo. More detailed bios for our speakers are on the event webpage for your reference. Thank you to both Norah and Rudy for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Keer. It's an absolute pleasure to be here and to have this opportunity to have some conversation with a delightful alumni from the University of Waterloo's math faculty, Rudy Karsan. First of all, thank you for that lovely introduction and also for the terrific co-op challenge that the Faculty of Math has instigated. And I am very excited and very appreciative actually for the thoughtfulness behind that challenge and what that can do for our students. But first, let me also congratulate and welcome the graduating class and the tremendous achievements that you've made over the course of the last few years to get here. And really appreciate the fact that you're spending some time with us today as we have this conversation. As the Associate Provost for the University of Waterloo's Co-operative and Experiential Education program, in a nutshell, the entire portfolio is about connecting students, what they've studied over the course of their excellent academic programming at the University of Waterloo, what they've studied, to the world of work, and to help them make sense of that, as they have their co-op work terms, and about 70% of the graduating class participated in co-op, or whether they participated in the EDGE program or experiential program, partook one of our PD courses, or engaged in career education. All of it in sum is about helping students connect what they're learning and thinking about what is important to them what the world is needing of them, and the kind of path that they would like to undertake as they graduate, which is where we are right now. Now, given the current circumstances, I would imagine that the graduating class is thinking that how things are today is a little bit different than how they may have imagined it a few years ago or even a few months ago. Plans that they might have had in place for a specific job or a particular career path may look a little uncertain right now, or may not be as sure as they thought it could have been because of the uncertainty that is currently out there. And I think we have a wonderful resource with us today in Rudy in exploring this first question. Given that there is so much uncertainty right now and unpredictability with respect to finding a job or thinking about a career or how one might even navigate in this space, I thought, Rudy, that you might have some insights from your own career and your own life's journey about how you have adapted during times of uncertainty and in times that have been challenging for yourself. What kind of adaptations have you made? How have you navigated?
Look, the reality of the situation is if I'm graduating this year, life sucks. It's not what I expected. That's not the hand I expected to be dealt with. And to give you some context, I've been insolvent maybe about 3 times in my life. I've had a gun pulled on me in business negotiations. I've seen a significant amount of stress. And what I guess I would say to you is, to the graduating class, those of you that have a job that hasn't been pulled and you know where you're going, congratulations. I mean, that's a great feeling. It's a great feeling of having reached the end of this journey and leaving the womb of your parents and your school. To the rest, I would say congratulations. In a funny sort of a way, I'm a little bit envious. And let me explain to you why. Life is really interesting in that crisis and crises do happen. And we get scared, and fear is one of our biggest drivers. And in the society and in our species, we know that, and we've learned that when we are fearful, we either fight or flee or freeze. And in this situation, if you freeze, you will die. By that I mean, if you decide to go to your parents' house and hunker down, life is going to be really tough for you. If you choose to fight for a job, 25% of you will get one. What happens to the others? What are you going to flee to? Where are you going to go? And I believe you have 3 choices. The first choice is to serve. When my kids graduated, I ended I give them a fairly long letter, and I ended it with this commentary. When parents start to talk, children stop listening. And the 3 most important things in life I've learned are, and the first one was serve with abandon. Serving is the elixir of humanity. Canada is filled with probably the strongest civil society on the planet. What a tremendous opportunity for you as you leave the womb of your parents and your school to really taste the joy of serving. Your second choice, I believe, is to say, I'm going to shift my paradigm from finding a job to finding work. And I'm going to find that work by creating a series of tasks and mini jobs, whether it is helping my neighbor walk a dog, and that's not beneath me, by the way, or driving an Uber, and that's not beneath me either, because I am working. And I string together a group of mini jobs to help me navigate my way through what will ultimately be my career. And my final choice is start a company or find a friend to start a company with. But really, those are my 3 fleet choices right now. And if I would kind of, if I would really focus in on these three, you can start to develop a game plan on a go forward basis. So I would end by saying the view is difficult and rewarding, because even though life sucks right now, in order to lead a great life, stress is the entry ticket into it, and you got gobs of it right now. So the class of 2020, the ones that haven't found a job, I would say congratulations. You are truly beginning your life. And I'm a little bit envious that you're learning what I learned in my 30s, that you get a chance to learn in your 20s.
Okay, so that's wonderful, because basically don't freeze, keep moving, and there are three strategies. Serve with abandon, figure out what work means to you, and start a business. So for someone who's thinking about those three strategies, a starting point to try and determine what kind of business, for example, or what sort of work would be, what do I value? So thinking about one's own values and getting clarity on one's own values can also start to develop a direction around how one might embark on these three strategies. So that question of values for yourself and over the course of your career and your work, what kind of values have helped you navigate difficult times or have helped you define your path as you've moved forward along your journey?
Nora, I love the F word. For me, the F word is focus. And focus sits above my 6 Fs. So my values are my faith, my family, my finances, my fun, my friends, and my fitness. And my focus is balanced with those 6 Fs. And the tighter life gets, the more stressful it gets, I discard each one of those Fs. And fortunately, in my life, I've never been stressed to the point where I've had to go below the 6. So it's come down to my faith, my family, and my finances. But if I was looking at it from that perspective, and if I was really kind of caught up in that level of stress, I would say that, and you'll hear me say this word often, it's really all about the focus. And you really need to think about, how am I going to get a focused approach on what I'm going to do on a go-forward basis? So let me kind of start with what I would do. If I'm in the top 25% of the class, I've got a job. So let's kind of put those guys aside for a second, those guys and gals aside for a moment. Then I would look at the next 75, right? If I'm in that 75% group, I've come from one of two dimensions. I'm either coming from the tech dimension, or I'm coming from the non-tech dimension, whether that be XI, someone like me, or whether it be pure math or applied math or what have you. If I'm coming from the tech side, I would look at it and say, what's the number one nascent tech world that I can start building my mini gigs around, or my mini jobs around, or start a business around? And to me, from where I sit, being in the tech world for a while now, I would say the answer is rather obvious. There is one thing about software and about computers that's unnatural, and that's the way we communicate. We use our eyes, we use our fingers. In real life, we communicate using our voice. And voice technology is in a very nascent stage. You know, you've got Alexa and whatever, Siri and Google and all those. And it's just started. So what can I do to either build apps there, or help somebody else, or go to a smaller company and show them a strategy on how to use voice? And there is an area. Now, again, if I come from the tech world, I might decide to do something else, but there's a suggestion. If I'm from the non-tech world, I think I would rip the paradigm of a job. And what I mean by that, the word job is only like a relatively new word. It's only been around since the late 1600s. Humans have always worked. We haven't always had jobs. And so you should think about what brings meaning to me. And not only that, it's like I have the opportunity to rewrite the way I looked at the world. Let me rip away my old paradigm. Let me rip away the sense of a job and a career. And let me think about meaning. Let me think about how I would construct myself in this new world. Let me tell you something that is, as far as I'm concerned, a fact, because I've got enough data supporting it. I've either been the CEO of a company or sit on the board or owned companies through every single crisis since 1987. And the one fact that I have seen every single time is a crisis accelerates upward trends and decelerates downward trends. And jobs have been in a bear market globally for the last 20 plus years. The number of jobs on this planet are shrinking. Work is growing. Jobs are shrinking. And so I have this pretty simple approach that I take. I call it the thrival strategy. How to thrive after you survive. And when you're entering into the workforce right now, survival is not an issue because I still have permission from my parents or my existing sources that allows me to survive. So I immediately will move to what can I do now to thrive? And once I understand that, and thrival doesn't necessarily mean I got to make as much money as I can, or I got to win an award. It's more like what gives me the highest quality of life. I've got a way to restructure and rethink what's important to me, and what a gift in my 20s. I mean, that's phenomenal.
So, in thinking about this, the decline of jobs, but the increase in work and what you've seen over the course of your career, and also as the leader of a significant HR company where you've seen human resource development, talent, and acquisition from many perspectives, there must be some key skills or capabilities or durable talents that you've seen work no matter what the circumstances are in different types of work, that our graduates might think about either emphasizing or strengthening and developing for themselves right now, regardless of where they end up. Any thoughts about those key skills and some of those capabilities that are very durable and help one navigate circumstances?
Let's go back to the original thesis, right? If you're scared and in time of crisis, you can't freeze.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to either fight or flee.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to fight or flee, what are the key characteristics? I have to be agile. It's number one. And so how do I improve my agility? As far as I'm concerned, in today's society, there's only two ways to improve agility. Continuous learning and continuous breaking of the lenses around which I make decisions. So constantly challenging my assumptions as I'm making decisions. Those are the two ways that I improve on agility. The second thing I need to be resilient. What adds to my resilience is what are my daily practices that add to my resilience. So I can share my personal daily practices with you. Mm-hmm. For the last 40 years, it's been pretty standard. I try and work out as much as I can. And I know when you see this fat podge of a man in front of you, it's hard to believe, but I really do. I try and, no, let me rephrase that. I never forget to explicitly state the 3 reasons that I'm grateful for every single night before I go to bed. So it's like I say to my kids, have an attitude of gratitude, which was the second thing I said in the letter, having that attitude of gratitude. And the third is don't be so busy that you don't have time for yourself. And so have that time to be able to either meditate, pray, introspect. Those three attributes has led to what I believe is resilience. So I can now take whatever the planet dishes out to me. The third would be, and I'll leave it at three. The third would be grit. Grit is the ability which is driven basically by the fact that I cannot die. So I am 100% convinced this crisis will pass. But I am 100% aware of the brutal facts of my world right now. It's holding these two opposable ideas simultaneously in my head are the drivers of my grit. Being constantly aware of the brutal facts and the almost 100% level of optimism that this too shall pass.
So keeping those things in balance then, not shying away from the reality of the situation, but also having faith in oneself and one's abilities to overcome and be able to navigate and move forward along some of the lines that you've suggested. So pulling this all together, we've talked about, you've mentioned some areas that could be interesting areas of work for these students in the tech space and the non-tech space. You've talked about some important values that have helped you navigate during difficult times. The durable capabilities of being agile, resilience, having grit. Wrapping that all up for this graduating class, do you have some sort of summarizing comments that they can take with them as they enter what some might call the world of in crisis right now, but what you very nicely framed has lots of opportunity in place, but maybe some summarizing thoughts in that regard?
Whenever I am in a situation which appears to be untenable, I go back to the ancients. And one of the most ancient languages we have is Mandarin. And if you look at the way they designed the word crisis over a millennia of time, is they put together the two symbols, which means opportunity and risk or danger. When you put those two things together, you get crisis. So the way the ancients are guiding me is to say, I now have a gift of choice. Do I look at this crisis from the lens of opportunity, or do I look at this crisis from the lens of risk? And my sincerest thoughts and prayers to the graduating class are, you have a choice. Make the right one. Good luck and God bless.
That's lovely, and that's a lovely way to summarize. Now, I think we are going to be moving on to some questions. If you're ready, Rudy, there's some questions coming in from the Q&A on the live feed. So if you're ready, I think we'll start answering some of those questions. You good to go?
Yep, I'm good to go.
Okay, first question has come in, and it's this. Rudy references some of the crises he has navigated in his career. I'd love him to delve into more detail about one of them. How did he approach it? What strategies did he use? How was it resolved?
So I refer to the three insolvencies, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I've met a number of crises in my life. So I'm going to go as far back as I can remember. And that was a very early crisis I had. So I had started a company, and that company was only 9 months old. And I just moved to the US, and I was completely out of money, to the point where I was living at my partner's house. And then when I was doing the books of the company, I found that his wife was stealing money. from the company. So the company had very little money, and whatever little money it had was being stolen. And I didn't have enough money for my kid and my wife to live in, a house to live in. So the way I overcame that was I took a step back and I said, what's kind of the most important thing to me? At this point in time, this isn't about honor and it isn't about values. It's about survival for my family. Suck it up, dude. Figure out a way to navigate past it, stop the accounts from going to her, and then you'll figure out a way to go to the next step. Your first step is to make sure you get enough money to move out of the house into your house, and then you can go ahead and challenge your partner and do what you need to do. Get the basic strength to fight the battle. So looking back, was I dishonest with myself? Absolutely yes. And if you want to judge me as being dishonest with myself, so be it. But you know what? My daughter, who was 2 years old, needed food. I was going to suck it up for her. And so that's a decision I made. That's the decision I took. I moved on, and then my life continued from there on out, and I changed it, and I went in a different direction. But I had to survive so that I could fight the battle the next day. So a lot of times I say, at the end of the day, make your decision based on your values. But the number one value is survival. Let's not get too highfalutin about looking at rights and wrongs and morals and all that. If you're dying, morality is, the first morality is survive. And in my mind, I mean, I didn't even have my papers in the US at that point in time. So, I mean, I had to survive. And I did what I had to do. Now, I can tell you about the stories about the bankruptcies and all that, but I think from the student perspective, that kind of happened in my 20s. And I made a tough decision. And, you know, maybe life would have been different had I been more moral, but I made those choices and I live with them.
So very much taking care of first priorities first and getting that stable.
It's all about survival, Nora. I mean, the first step is I got to survive. My kids got to get food. Mm-hmm. That's my, you know, that's it. Once I know that, then I can take care of everything else.
Okay, so I think this allows us to enter into the second question. And the second question is coming in now, and it I think is an interesting one to follow up on that, because you talked about the importance of spending some time each day to be have some contemplation, some meditation, some thoughtfulness. So the question is, how do you make space for mindfulness when you are worried about meeting your immediate needs?
I've used different tools over the years. So it starts at the very top. Remember I said I have my 6 F's. F's one of my favorite letters in the alphabet, right? I love the F words. And I've been coached by everybody not to use the other side of the F words in this discussion. So, but I normally do use them. I would say that if I start at the top, if you look at my 3 biggest ones, it's my faith, my family, and my finances, right? So my faith itself gives me the space. So when I'm really scared is the time I am praying and meditating more. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but it is really a fundamental aspect of me. I've trained myself that the more scared I am, the more I pray and the more I meditate. And because this is a skill that was built up since I was in my late single-digit years, I'm talking about 8 and 9 and 10. The more I got scared, the more I'd be running, the more I'd be praying and meditating. So it was a skill set that I developed. Now, at times of intense pain and intense fear, the way that I have always seek solace is I said, the species has survived. And since I am a member of this species, I too shall survive. In order for me to survive, I have to be healthy spiritually, physically, emotionally, and intellectually. And those are the 4 dimensions around which I build myself. Mm-hmm. So when it really breaks down, I go back to my core. And so the tool that I use is the species has survived and so shall I. And if you really think about it, I know we are in the middle of a crisis, Noah, but we are really living in the golden age of humanity. Let's not forget that. Lifespans are longer than they have ever been. We lead the softest life we've ever had. There's more abundance on the planet. We are feeding 8 billion people, or I should say 7 billion because 1 billion aren't fed. We've taken more people out of poverty in the last 50 years than in the preceding 500 years, according to the United Nations, with all these nasty things happening to us. Debts due to hostilities is at an all-time low. Homicide rates in the US, even in the middle of this crisis, is half of where it was in the 60s. Like, I mean, we forget these things. Mm-hmm. So the species does get better. And so these are the kinds of things. It's the bigger picture that allows me. So the tools I use are, and then the final tool is a tool that I learned in my late 20s, is I stopped reading the newspaper. Because I understood the financial model of the news media is to get you to read or watch TV, from which they make money. And the extent to which the human mind gets accelerated in its thinking with danger is 10 times higher than where the mind engages a time of extreme joy. So the extreme danger is 10 times more effective because it's associated with survival. Mm-hmm. Yes. The media knows that, and therefore they have to instill that in order to continue doing what they're doing, which is be read and seen and heard. So in my late 20s, I stopped reading newspapers and I stopped watching TV, and I took that out of my diet altogether. And I subscribed to what I called real information, subscribed to what I call real data, and not people's perspectives whom I didn't know and I didn't care about. I did an interesting study when I was in my late 20s. I just for myself personally, as I was getting this up, I looked at the 365-day headlines in the Toronto Star 5 years before to see what was relevant. So this happened when I was 23, so I just checked it out because I was subscribing and those newspapers were in my basement. So before I threw them out, I looked at each one of those. And guess what? Not a single one of those headlines was relevant to my life 5 years later. And that kind of broke my habit. Hmm. So when I was discarding it, as I was discarding, I was scanning through the headlines. And I said, none of this thing is relevant in my life today. Like, why am I spending time here? So in my late 20s, before I moved to the US, and I emptied out my basement of all the trash, that was one of the exercises I carried out. And it taught me a really important lesson. Do not listen to the media or TV.
And
yet, create space.
And yet find your own sources of information and your own sources of data.
And my own trusted sources, yes.
Right. And on that, another question has come in that might be interesting as we're talking about higher order things now. What advice might you have about finding your passion? This is something you've talked about in the past, the importance of passion. How might one of these graduating students work towards finding their passion, what they're most interested in, and using this particular circumstance in order to do that?
So let me answer the question in 2 ways. What's the framework I use to think about it? So let me go back to the ancients, which is the example of the Chinese I use. Now let me use the example of the Indians and the Japanese, right? In the Hindu culture, there are the three passions. Passion for yourself and your joys in life, compassion for others, and for others in your dealings with them, and this passion on the outcome. So if your inside speaks a certain way, make sure you speak it with compassion and be dispassionate with the outcome, because you can't control the environment. Mm-hmm. So when I was thinking about passion, and in the book I wrote, I talked about the three P's: purpose, passion, and pay. Those are the three dimensions that I looked at. And then I started doing some more research on it, and I realized that that wasn't the answer. The answer is in this notion called ikigai. It's the old Japanese concept of learning till you die. Yeah, so it's a really powerful concept, because what it does is it creates a platform around decision making that results in a core of your being, the center, which you're constantly looking for. And once you get there, it gives you the power of a tornado. It really does. It's incredibly powerful. So if you start out with the three P's, which is passion, purpose, and pay, it's easier to understand. Ikigai is harder to understand. Now, the passion is something that you don't really search for. It'll happen. And don't feel ashamed as if you don't have it. I know in society, we have glorified this word called passion. Don't glorify it. Let it arrive to you naturally. Don't go on a hunt for it. It will find you when you're ready to receive the gift.
It's wonderful that you have reflected on some ancient cultures as we think about the current state. And you've talked about referencing the Mandarin language, some Hindu tenets, as well as Japanese, the ikigai concept, which is something that we work on in our program, or we're starting to develop some programming on in the portfolio of Co-op and Experiential Education, helping students think about what is it they value, which we talked about today, what talents they need to develop to have that adaptability and resilience, what does the world need so that they can think about how to focus at, and how are they going to sustain themselves throughout their careers and through work. And through the intersection of those four domains, that finding of one's purpose in order to navigate whatever uncertainty is ahead of us. And that's very much how we're framing and thinking about the programs and the work that we do. But before we sum up here today, I wondered if you had any final thoughts or comments to share with the group. And especially, it's very easy in a time such as this to end up becoming or distracting oneself by becoming very busy or very preoccupied with a whole number of tasks to keep oneself going. And if you have any final summarizing thoughts for this graduating class.
So let me pick on a word you just said. Busy. If I look at my life, I have rarely been busy. Let me explain to you why I say that. If you go back again to the Chinese culture, if you go back to Mandarin, busy is made up of two words, slow and death. So every time I'm busy, I'm slowly dying. And I don't want to die slowly. I want to lead a full life, and then I want to die abruptly. So as I look at the graduating class once again, I would say to you, you are in a really, really, really powerful place. We're entering into a tremendous new future. The technology is going to change the way we look at the world. We're going to be riding these waves of change, and just enjoy the joy and exhilaration of that ride. Don't be busy. Look at the opportunity, and most importantly, laugh and laugh and laugh. Good luck. God bless.
I'm sure very much that over the years, you've been a terrific mentor to others, and I'm sure that your words have provided a lot of thoughtful thoughtful comments for people to consider and contemplate as they look at their own next steps as graduating students, and also as whoever else might be joining us online, whether they're alumni and others who are part of the program. I just want to go back just for a second on this concept of mentorship. Actually, it's something that we haven't touched on, and I wondered if you wanted to touch on it just briefly, how someone might find a mentor or work with a mentor through these next phases of life.
One of the things you didn't ask me was if you had to mention what was the biggest mistake you made? I would answer that question by saying the mistake is the mistake of arrogance. Look, I became a fellow at a fairly young age. You know, in my 30s, I was doing fairly well. And so I had believed that I was God's gift to the business world. And I didn't need any mentors. So through my 30s, I didn't have one. And that's when I really ran into trouble. And so there are a lot of human beings that can give you experiences. And the best way to find a mentor is look for people that don't give you advice, but do three things for you. They give you data, they share their experiences, and they ask you questions. The mind, at least let me rephrase that. I freeze when I'm given advice. Every fiber of my body wants to rebel because everyone who has a navel can give you advice. I'd rather get the data, I'd rather get the experiences, I'd rather get the questions so I can develop my own journey. And so to everyone who's graduating, I would say, go out there and find a couple of people who can meet those three criteria for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you'll find your mentors. And when you find them, don't ditch them. Ditch them when you outgrow them, but don't ditch them through your own arrogance. Don't make the same mistake I made. It's really a nasty place to be in life without mentors.
Well, I think that's actually a wonderful way to end. And I think you have demonstrated excellent mentorship actually here today in the conversations. You've given us lots of data and things to think about. You've shared your experiences in a way that was most generous of you with the group. I don't think that you've provided any sorts of advice that people would find objectionable in any way, but in fact would have really benefited from it. And I certainly have benefited from our time that we've shared together. So I would like again to thank you, Rudy, for your time with us and being with us today. I wish you all a very good remainder of activities for this day. And before we finally leave, there are some thoughts from an alumnus from the Faculty of Math that we would like to share with you now. And thank you again very much, everyone.
Hello, how are you? My name is Jashan Chadha, and I'm a Waterloo Math graduate, class of 1997. First of all, let me say congratulations. You made it. No doubt the last few years has been a grueling, challenging, but most importantly, rewarding experience. The skill set that you've learned now will no doubt allow you to be successful in the next stage of your lives, no matter what you choose to do. When I think back to my time at Waterloo, I had no idea of what a profound impact it would have both on my professional and personal life. The co-op program allowed me to experiment with different industries, with different work environments, and I moved from originally computer programming to ending up with a degree in actuarial science, worked in the actuarial departments at insurance companies during my work terms, but it was my last co-op term that launched my finance career. A 2-day work trip to New York in my last work term ended up resulting in 23 years in New York City. I'm fortunate to have worked at some of the world's biggest banks in the world of finance, and I currently oversee the Global Equity Derivatives Department at UBS in New York. And I also get to still have fun because I still get to work with Waterloo grads, both co-ops and full-time, and I'm continually impressed by their intelligence and work ethic. One thing over the last 23 years in New York that has helped me, that I learned at Waterloo, both through the ups and good times of New York and the more challenging times, was resilience. And having a Waterloo degree required, and obtaining it, resilience, and that has stayed with me for my entire life. Now, as you think about what the next stage of your lives are, I think it's important that you take a step back and enjoy this moment. You've worked hard, you deserve it. Be proud of what you've achieved. And besides, now you get to join the best alumni network in the world, the Waterloo Math Alumni Network.